Pleasure.
There we go. I think that is your cue now.
Okay. Well, I would like to request the devotees on Zoom, as far as possible, to put on their cameras so we can see their moon-like faces and it's more personal.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada, all glories to you. Once again, thank you so much for taking your time out and being with us. Thank you so much for accepting our request. And we are glad and pleased to see you again and hear from you again. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Okay. So I will begin by singing the Mangala Charana prayers and leading a short kirtan. And then I will speak about Srila Prabhupada's extraordinary departure. Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagritatam Sagana Raghunatham Nitam Sam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam
For your time with us tonight on In Focus. Dr. Tracy, I'll start you.
Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvidanscha Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paripraja Kacharya Stotra to see Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakacarya Stotra Satyasri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Om. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Just a humble request. If you can please stay on your videos. That was a humble request by Maharaj. We'll appreciate. Hare Krishna. And also acknowledging the joining of His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj as well. Welcome, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hi. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hari, Hari, Gaur Hari.
Nice to see your moonlight face.
We're waiting for the shower of nectar.
So today's topic is Srila Prabhupada's extraordinary departure. And we will begin this narration on Srila Prabhupada's last day with us, which was November 14th, 1977, in Vrindavan. By afternoon, Srila Prabhupada had fallen into an internal state of consciousness. The devotees placed Tulsi leaves and Yamuna water by his head. The room resounded with kirtan, and the doors were open to everyone. The room was packed. Young, old, men, women, all were allowed to be with Srila Prabhupada to express their love. Several times, Pishima, Srila Prabhupada's sister and god-sister, asked, Prabhupada, have you eaten anything? But he did not respond. She poured a few drops of Ganges water in his mouth. Ban Maharaj, Krishnadas Babaji, Anand Prabhu, and Prabhupada's god-nephew Narayan Maharaj soon arrived and sat on benches on either side of the bed, observing his consciousness. When Narayan Maharaj spoke in Prabhupada's ear, Prabhupada did not respond. But when Bhakti True told him that Maharaj and others were present, he slowly raised his left hand to his head in salutation and started crying. Prabhupada's godbrothers ventured that his attacks were simply the moving of the airs in the body. He was in perfect consciousness, they said. His time for departure had not yet come. After a while, all of them, except Anand Prabhu, left, promising to return the minute the devotees called. The Giriraj, Ayurvedic physician, said that Prabhupada had only 2 or 3 hours left. Pujaris brought Tulsi flower garlands from Krishna Balaram and placed them on the pillow around Prabhupada's head. The devotees continued chanting and praying. There was nothing else we could do. When a final attack came at 3 p.m., Prabhupada rubbed his hand quickly back and forth across his heart. Upendra massaged his heart. Tamal Krishna sat holding his feet. And for the next 4 hours, Prabhupada was peaceful. I was at the head of the bed, wishing I could have one last chance to serve Prabhupada in his bodily form. Suddenly he threw his arm back, and I was able to touch his hand and squeeze it gently. He had fulfilled my desire. I was grateful, satisfied, even amidst the overwhelming sorrow. As Prabhupada's departure grew closer, the kirtan, led by Giriraj, became more and more intense. Sung, as Shaktimata later recalled, quote, in a kind of unusual chorus of 2 parts, in a way that we never sang before. Some devotees were singing Jai Prabhupada, while others were chanting the Maha Mantra. And somehow the 2 blended together in the most perfectly beautiful way. We don't sound like this, I thought. This isn't coming from us. It was like the room had no ceiling, like all the bricks and beams had dissolved and the whole room was open in a direct current to the spiritual world as Krishna's messengers came for Srila Prabhupada. At 7:25, Prabhupada opened his eyes and moved his lips as if speaking, Hare Krishna. Then his jaw dropped, his complexion darkened, and he went still. The Giriraj took Prabhupada's pulse and held a cotton swab to his nostrils. There was no breath. Tamal Krishna wrote in his diary, our beloved Srila Prabhupada had departed. He had been surrounded by loving disciples chanting the holy names of Krishna, lying peacefully in his bed, well, not in his bed, lying peacefully on his bed in Ramanreti Vrindavan, the sacred land where Krishna and his friends used to sport. His head was pointing toward the deities of Krishna Balaram. His forehead decorated with chandan and a large Tulsi leaf, with photos of them and Radha Krishna and pictures of Lord Nrsingadev and Prabhupada's Guru Maharaj nearby. A volume of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita laid beside his pillow. Holding Tulsi in his right hand, he had departed and returned to the lotus feet of Krishna, from whence he had come. It was 7:25 p.m. on Gaura Chaturthi Tithi, the 4th day of the light half of the month of Kartik, 5 minutes before the beginning of Amrita Yoga, the most auspicious time of the day. Bharadraj wrote in his journal, 7:25, Prabhupada enters my heart in a flood of tears. The sun of the world has set. The shelter of the world has entered Vaikuntha. Harinam continues on and on. The room was filled with crying and wailing. The kirtan was going wild, with devotees chanting Hare Krishna and Jai Prabhupada. Bhishma, weeping piteously, went to the foot of Prabhupada's bed, lifted the chadar, and placed his feet on her head. Then she took dust from them and smeared it on her head and eyes. Other devotees followed, clutching Prabhupada's lotus feet. Most of the devotees were then asked to leave, and Upendra wiped Prabhupada's body, decorated it with Vaishnav tilak markings, and dressed him in fresh clothes. Devotees sat Prabhupada up, crossed his legs, and secured him to his palanquin. Bhavananda closed his jaw, which had remained open, and the devotees tied it shut with a cloth around his head. Narayan Maharaj came, garlanded Prabhupada, and discussed with Tamal Krishna and Bhavananda what should be done. Then we carried Prabhupada on his palanquin into the temple, amidst the blowing of conch shells and beating of mridangas and kartals. He was brought before each deity, then around the temple 3 times, and again before Krishna Balaram. Then we circumambulated his body 4 times with kirtan, and finally placed the whole palanquin on his Vyasasana. By Srila Prabhupada's grace, even amidst the overwhelming feeling of sorrow, I was surprised to find myself experiencing a sort of ecstasy. Narayan Maharaj, Krishna Das Babaji, Anand Prabhu, and many of Prabhupada's disciples led kirtan and prayers throughout the night, while we sat, as we had so often, at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet, gazing at his divine form. Narayan Maharaj began with Yeya Nilo Premadana, Narottam Das Thakur's song for departed Vaishnavas, while Omkar performed arti and devotees offered Prabhupada flowers. Krishnadas Babaji sang in the middle of the night, and Anand Prabhu led Mangalarti. That morning, the residents of Vrindavan awaited their last darshan of the great Acharya of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, who had spread Vrindavan's glories throughout the world. At 6:30, the Goswamis of the 7 main temples arrived to escort Prabhupada's divine form to their respective deities. He was sitting straight up, legs crossed, wearing his hat and chadar, in his flower-decorated palanquin, covered with garlands offered by disciples the night before. Narayan Maharaj led the kirtan as we brought Prabhupada into the courtyard. Again, circumambulated his body 4 times and began our procession with uproarious chanting, Mahasankirtan. Vrajavasis came out from their homes and shops to watch, standing on steps and balconies and alongside the road, calling out Jai Prabhupada to honor Vrindavan's favorite son, most famous saint, and international ambassador. Quote, all these hundreds of people came from nowhere, Rajashekar recalled. I couldn't figure out how everyone had heard about the procession, or even how they had heard that Prabhupada had left. I had never seen Vrindavan in such a mood. Everyone came out to pay homage. Wherever we went, the rooftops were packed. Bhagavat remembered, as we went from one place to the other, people were performing arati, offering flowers and offering prasad. All of Vrindavan was displaying their love and affection for Srila Prabhupada. Tamal Krishna, along with many of us, was openly weeping. As we approached each temple, the head pujari would come out to receive Prabhupada, and the kirtan would rise to a crescendo, with Narayan Maharaj singing, Jai Madan Mohan, Jai Radha Damodar, Jai Radha Raman, glorifying each deity, and then Jai Prabhupada. Even submerged in an ocean of grief, we devotees also felt proud to be disciples of such an illustrious, exalted, empowered guru. The parikrama lasted 3 hours, concluding when we returned to the Krishna Balaram temple. We brought Prabhupada to the Samadhi site near the front of the property, and Upendra and Bhavananda undressed him, leaving only his coat and loincloth, and placed him on banana leaves. First Narayan Maharaj, then Krishnadas Babaji, and then Anand Prabhu poured Yamuna water over him. And Tamal Krishna then took the conch shell and, allowing the devotees to touch it, poured water over Prabhupada's body many times. The personal servants dressed Prabhupada in new silks and a new sacred thread. Narayan Maharaj took a Tulsi manjari and with chandan wrote the Samadhi mantra on Prabhupada's chest. He, Anand Prabhu, Tamal Krishna, and Bhakti Charu descended the 8 feet into the Samadhi pit, at the bottom of which lay a pure white marble slab. They performed pujas, with Anand Prabhu chanting the mantras while guiding the movements of Tamal Krishna's hands. Bhavananda and Upendra lifted Prabhupada into Tamal Krishna's arms, and they placed him in a sitting position and offered arati. The devotees above, who had been chanting and blowing conch shells, then offered pushpanjali, throwing thousands of flowers upon Prabhupada's form. And, as Prabhupada had instructed, Tamal Krishna kept some of the flowers to be taken to Mayapur for his Pushpa Samadhi. Devotees lowered brass buckets of salt, and we watched as Prabhupada's form disappeared under the salt being placed around his body, until all we could see was a golden patch that was the top of his head, and then nothing. As we passed buckets of earth to fill the rest of the samadhi, and with tears in my eyes and my arms trembling, I lifted each shovelful of soil. I reflected that this might be the last personal service I offered to Srila Prabhupada's Vapu. Narayan Maharaj asked for a long bamboo stick to place above Prabhupada's head to mark the place. And after reaching ground level, the devotees built up an area about 3 feet above where his body was situated, and the bamboo pole was extracted. Maharaj broke the bamboo pole in 3 places, put one on either side, and tore some of his upper cloth to attach the 3rd piece to the 2 sides from behind, creating an easel for Prabhupada's photo. The area was covered with fresh cow dung and then saffron silk. And another saffron cloth was suspended above on 4 bamboo poles with colorful cloth flags at each corner. Tulsi plants were placed on either side, and Prabhupada's preferred photo of himself chanting japa on the lawn at Bhaktivedanta Manor was propped on the raised ground. Pradumya offered boga, prepared by Ayodhyapati, who now is Bhakti Bringa Govinda Swami Maharaj, and his team, and a full arati. Bharadraj led the kirtan, and we all circumambulated 4 times. When the cloth covering was removed from the boga offering, Tamal Krishna turned to Upendra and said, "Look, Upendra, in his first offering in his samadhi, Prabhupada got his 2 favorite foods, laglu and kachoris." In a mood of complete and utter surrender, we offered obeisances at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namani. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna on this earth, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nivishesha Shunyavadi, Paschatya Deshatarine. Our respectful obeisances are unto you, O spiritual master, servant of Saraswati Goswami. You are kindly preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Dev and delivering the Western countries, which are filled with impersonalism and voidism. So many people had joined together in their love and respect for Srila Prabhupada. But even after his departure, the controversy over the Govardhan Parikrama continued, and the feelings remained strong on both sides. The controversy was that Srila Prabhupada had expressed his desire to go to Govardhan Hill by Bulla cart for Govardhan Puja. And immediately, the disciples broke into 2 groups. Most of Srila Prabhupada's personal staff, Tamal Krishna Goswami, Bhakti True Swami, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Swami, who then was Swarup Damodar Das Brahmachari. They were opposed to the idea because they felt that Srila Prabhupada, in his very frail condition, would not be able to sustain the journey. And others, led by Hamsaduta Prabhu, said that it is not our business to evaluate the instruction of the spiritual master or to try to impose our will on the spiritual master. But we should simply execute the order of the spiritual master. So the feelings ran high on both sides, and there was a lot of, you could say, arguing back and forth. But in the end, Srila Prabhupada agreed not to go. And as we read, he, in due course, he left his body in his room at the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan. So many people had joined together in their love and respect for Srila Prabhupada. But even after his departure, the controversy over the Govardhan Parikrama continued, and the feelings remained strong on both sides. I still couldn't determine who had been right, and the question persisted in my mind. My usual practice had been to chant japa in Prabhupada's room when he was out. And the day after he was placed in samadhi, I was chanting behind his bed in a small corner by a bookshelf when my eyes fell upon the new volume of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Volume 2, that had been made for Prabhupada with gold embossing. When I opened it, I happened to land upon chapter 9, Mother Yashoda binds Krishna. I read a few verses and purports, and then I came to a verse that I felt answered my question. Evam Sandarshita Yanga Harina Brityavashyata Savashena Pi Krishnena Yasyedam Sheshvaram Vashe. O Maharaj Parikshit, this entire universe, with its great exalted demigods, like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and Lord Indra, is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet the Supreme Lord has one transcendental attribute. He comes under the control of his devotees. This was now exhibited by Krishna in this pastime. The pastime was encapsulated in the previous verse. Swamatu Svinagar Traya Vishwasta Kavarasraja Drisra Parishrama Krishna Kripaya Sit Sabandane. Because of Maharaj Yashoda's hard labor, her whole body became covered with perspiration, and the flowers and comb were falling from her hair. When child Krishna saw his mother thus fatigued, he became merciful to her and agreed to be bound. When I read the verses, I thought, this is what happened. The spiritual master was the transparent medium through which Krishna manifested himself. Of course, in Vraja Bhakti, the relationship with Krishna was different. Krishna exhibited Nar-lila, human-like pastimes, in which there was complete intimacy and freedom between the devotees and the Lord. Whereas in the relationship between disciple and spiritual master, there is always an element of awe and reverence and duty. Still, duty was meant to lead to love. Prabhupada had said to Babaji Maharaj, just see how much they love me. And during the incident a month before, when the disciples had appealed to Prabhupada to stay longer, which meant him drinking, and he had accepted their plea, he had said, this is real affection. When I read the verse, I thought of the two incidents and put them together. In both cases, when the disciples had expressed themselves, we want you to stay, Prabhupada had approved, saying, this is real affection, and just see how much my disciples love me. All the devotees in the controversy had been acting on the basis of their realization of their devotion for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada had been drawing out our loving feelings and encouraging us to go beyond just following his orders. Following the order was a given. There was no question. To follow the order of the spiritual master is a basic principle of spiritual life. And to disobey his order would be an offense against him and the holy name. So it was not a question of disobeying the order of the spiritual master. It was about developing loving feelings for the spiritual master and expressing them to him. Relating the verse to what Prabhupada had done with us, I saw a parallel between the Damodar Lila and the principle of spontaneous love. Every night during the month of Damodar, Kartik, we recited the Damodar Astaka, including Iti Driksa Lila Bir Ananda Kunde Swago Shamni Majantan Akaya Payantam Tadiye Shita Geshu Bhaktar Jitatvam Puna Prematastam Shattavritti Vande. Quote, by such pastimes, he is drowning the inhabitants of Gokul in pools of ecstasy and revealing to those who are absorbed in knowledge of his supreme majesty and opulence that he is conquered only by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and is free from all conceptions of awe and reverence. To this Supreme Lord, Sri Damodar, whose belly is bound not with ropes, but with his devotees' pure love, I offer my humble obeisances hundreds and hundreds of times. The Damodar Lila was meant to show the special power of pure spontaneous love to conquer the Lord. The Lord came under its control. Similarly, Prabhupada had brought love out from deep within the recesses of our hearts, and then he reciprocated with us by coming under the control of that love, by agreeing to our loving requests. As Bharadraj Prabhu later told me, quote, I came to the conclusion that it was just fine the way it was. No one was right or wrong. It was all acceptable. In those personal exchanges with Prabhupada, we cannot judge. We cannot fault or praise them. In their reciprocation with Prabhupada, every devotee received a particular gift, a personal gift, an instruction or a lesson from him. And in that interplay, which was almost like a dramatic performance, everyone was affected in a very special and personal, intimate way. It was rasa, an exchange of transcendental mellows. Prabhupada's final pastimes had been very deep. Among the disciples around him at the end, it was understood that as the perfect acharya, he had taught us by his own example how to live in Krishna consciousness, and then was teaching us how to die in Krishna consciousness. He was showing us how to retire to a holy place and how to be absorbed in hearing the holy names of the Lord. Up until the end, even in his delicate condition, he was trying to push forward the mission and was translating and dictating purports to Srimad Bhagavatam. And as an important part of that final lesson, he was also bringing us to a more intimate level of exchange where we could express to him our heart's deepest desires. There were natural boundaries between the disciples and spiritual master, and Prabhupada had always reminded us of those if he felt we were becoming too familiar. But in these final hours, he inspired each of us to reach out and express our love for him and ask him to stay with us. Soon after Prabhupada left, amidst all the grief and activity, I asked Tamal Krishna whether there was any service I could do. Not now, he said, later. Why don't you write an article about Srila Prabhupada and his departure, which we can send to our friends and devotees? And so I wrote that article, Submerged in Feelings of Deep Separation. I began by quoting Srimad Bhagavatam 10:48-26. Ka panditastvara param sharanam samiyad bhakta priyarita gira surida kritagyat sarvam dadati surido bhajato bikaman atmanam apyupaicha pachayo nayasya. Who can surrender to anyone other than yourself? Who is as dear, truthful, friendly, and grateful as you? You are so perfect and complete that even though you give yourself to your devotee, you are still full and perfect. You can satisfy all the desires of your devotee and even deliver yourself unto him. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is the most beloved personality, I wrote. And Srila Prabhupada was just like him. We loved him as the dearest personality, the life of our soul. And I wrote I guess you could say an outpouring of love and appreciation for Srila Prabhupada in the form of a letter or essay that could be sent to our devotees and friends. 4 days after Prabhupada's disappearance, on November 18th, Gopastami, the date when Krishna came of age and was given charge of the cows, to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's desire to go on parikrama and to have his association along the way, the devotees took a small brass deity of him to Govardhan Hill. We went first to Radha Kund, and Prabhupada's deity was placed on the Sangam, the strip between Radhakund and Shamkund, where there's a shrine with Govardhan Shilas. As we performed kirtan, I had the clear realization that the deity and Srila Prabhupada were the same. The deity was actually him. There was no difference. I began to cry, but I was happy. Prabhupada was right there, still with me. So, we spent several hours with Srila Prabhupada. We did a parikrama of Govardhan Hill. And I could say much more, but I'm not sure how much time we have. And I would also like to leave some time for questions and reflections. So I'll just conclude with one more point. Looking for solace and guidance in Prabhupada's books, I came across a section that addressed the disappearance of the spiritual master. Srimad Bhagavatam 4:28, 45 through 55. Some passages encouraged me that my lamentation over Prabhupada's departure was justified, and some that I could regain his association by serving his instructions. I was astonished. Srila Prabhupada was telling me exactly what I needed to know. Quote, the perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. I felt purified and exhilarated. I had gotten the guidance, the answers I needed in a most encouraging and empowering way. I went to share my discovery with Tamal Krishna and other friends who agreed that Srila Prabhupada was so perfect that he could provide all necessary instruction even after his departure. Hare Krishna. So now, if there's time, we can take questions and reflections. Who is our MC here?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Once again, thank you so much. You took us into the room of Srila Prabhupada and the final time when he left his body with your beautiful description. Thank you so much for that. Maharaj, I've got one question. As when you said that when you took Srila Prabhupada to Radhakund and Shamakund, and then when you saw the deities and you felt that it's Srila Prabhupada, maybe because you had that personal connection with Srila Prabhupada. And today, now that's like the second generation, when we enter the temple and we go and pay our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, at times how we should see that, okay, is Srila Prabhupada sitting there, because we didn't have that interaction personally. So how to develop that, that, okay, Srila Prabhupada is there.
Yes, I might mention that these life-size deities of Srila Prabhupada were made by his disciple Lochan Das. And the deities are so lifelike that in Juhu I saw people gather around his Vyasasan, looking at the deity and discussing amongst themselves or asking us, when is he going to speak? They thought it was really him, that he was there. And they were wondering when he would speak. So, in a way, it's easier for us who knew Srila Prabhupada personally to see the deity as him, because we saw him personally. But we, even you could say grand disciples, they can also appreciate that the deity is Srila Prabhupada. And that's the principle of deity worship. We have deities of Gaur Nitai, and we accept them as being Gaur Nitai. We have deities of Radha Krishna, we accept them as being Radha Krishna. And as Srila Prabhupada said, that if you see the deity as Krishna, he can speak to you. And if you see the deity as stone or metal, he will remain stone or metal for you forever. So, we can pray for that mercy to be able to appreciate the deity as the Lord himself, or as the Acharya himself. And we can get guidance from the deities. But mainly, we get guidance from the holy name. One Satsvarupa, well, he was Grihastha at the time. One Satsvarupa asked Srila Prabhupada, now you are here, so you can answer all of our questions, but what about in the future when you're not here? How will we get answers to our questions? And Srila Prabhupada replied, the holy name of Krishna is identical to Krishna. Do you realize this fact? And on other occasions also, Srila Prabhupada indicated that we could get answers to our questions by offenseless chanting of the holy names. So, yeah. And of course, Srila Prabhupada's books, that was what I discovered after he left, when I found that section in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam about the disappearance of the spiritual master. Everything was there.
Thank you, Maharaj. Is there anyone else who would like to ask or comment?
Baba Sandhi, maybe
Thank you,
does.
Maharaj. Thank you for the wonderful class. I was just wondering how, when you were talking about the tension between the devotees, the ones that wanted to take Srila Prabhupada, fulfill his desire to go to Govardhan, and the ones that wanted to serve him by maintaining his body as best they could. Especially in the age of Kali Yuga, there's so many disagreements all the time, even between devotees that are, both sides are trying to serve Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. So how can we not get disturbed by disagreements between devotees or tension, things like that?
Well, I think I would respond by reading a purport in which Srila Prabhupada gives a very good instruction about how devotees should relate with one another. And it's such an important purport that I quite frequently speak on it because it really guides us how to interact with one another. So I'll just read the last paragraph. I mean, the whole thing is very instructive. But I'll just come to the last paragraph. Srila Prabhupada writes, everyone should be friendly for the service of the Lord. Everyone should praise another's service to the Lord and not be proud of his own service. This is the way of Vaishnav thinking, Vaikuntha thinking. There may be rivalries and apparent competition between servants in performing service, but in the Vaikuntha planets, the service of another servant is appreciated, not condemned. This is Vaikuntha competition. There is no question of enmity between servants. Everyone should be allowed to render service to the Lord to the best of his ability, and everyone should appreciate the service of others. Such are the activities of Vaikuntha. Since everyone is a servant, everyone is on the same platform and is allowed to serve the Lord according to his ability. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Sarvasya chaham hridisani visto, madasmritirgyanam apohanam cha. The Lord is situated in everyone's heart, giving dictation according to the attitude of the servant. When a devotee very sincerely wants to render service to the Lord dictates. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 10:10, Tesham satatayuktanam vejatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. End quote. Everyone is actually a servant, not an enemy or friend, and everyone is working under different directions from the Lord, who directs each living entity according to his mentality. So this should be our motto. Everyone should be friendly for the service of the Lord. And I mean, during Srila Prabhupada's time, of course, we had differences amongst ourselves, but we knew that Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate. And as he said towards the end, your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate. So we should cooperate, for the sake of Srila Prabhupada. And yeah, I mean, I might not have answered your question directly, but I hope I've addressed your concern. But if you want to inquire further, you may now.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Jai. Then we have Sudharma Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, my Danvat pranams at your lotus feet. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj, thank you so much for giving the detailed description of Srila Prabhupada's departure. It helps me to prepare for my older mother, with Ashray Devi Dasi. She's 86 years old now. So thank you so much for giving the information, Maharaj. And Maharaj, another thing I wanted to ask is about Tulsi Devi, the
Yes.
placement of Tulsi. Can you please explain the significance of using Tulsi Devi in the final rites of devotees?
Are you referring to the way Tulsi was placed
Yes,
over where
yes,
Prabhupada's body was put?
yes,
What-
yes, Maharaj.
Yeah, that is our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. After Namacharya Haridas Thakur disappeared, as you know, Lord Chaitanya danced with his body and then took him to the ocean and bathed him in the ocean. He said, now the ocean will be a holy place because it has bathed the body of Haridas Thakur. And then he played, he made a place where Haridas Thakur was placed in Samadhi, and he put Tulsi there. The Supreme Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, he placed Tulsi there. So that is an example for us that we place Tulsi at the Samadhi site of a departed Vaishnava.
And in the cremation of the body, Maharaj, we can also put Tulsi wood.
Yes. Yes. And of course, obviously, we don't kill Tulsi, but if there is some dry Tulsi wood, we can use that.
Thank you very much, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you. Danvat pranam. Hare Krishna.
I have a question. This is Dave from Rita Swami. Hearing your presentation of the departure of Srila Prabhupada, I was moved to ask if you could kindly reveal what should I say was or is the foremost point or theme that comes to your head and heart, either during your presence at the disappearance or looking back upon it now? What just...
Well, since you asked what asked me for what pops into my mind, I'll tell you what popped into my mind. Towards the end, quite close to the end, devotees were massaging Srila Prabhupada. And Tamal Krishna Goswami said to Srila Prabhupada, the sons are cooperating for the sake of the father. And this was an allusion to a story that Srila Prabhupada would tell about a father whose sons were massaging him, but they were fighting amongst themselves. Oh, you're massaging the right arm. I want to massage the right arm. You get out of my way. And so like that, they were fighting amongst themselves. And of course, Srila Prabhupada told that story to illustrate what we should not do. So when we were massaging Srila Prabhupada at the end, Tamal Krishna Goswami said that with reference to that story that Srila Prabhupada sometimes told, that look, the sons are cooperating for the sake of the father. And for a while, I was massaging Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. And I felt dust. I mean, we often hear the phrase, the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee. But I literally felt dust. It was probably just some very small particles, but they were very much magnified in my consciousness. And I thought, oh, this is the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee. And so, yeah, Srila Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate and, be the servant of the servants. Sometimes disciples ask Srila Prabhupada, like, how do we deal with conflicts amongst the devotees? And Srila Prabhupada replied, if each devotee considers himself to be the servant of the servants, then there won't be conflict. So that's a very important principle. I mean, I'm not saying this to you. Obviously, you know everything I'm saying and more. But since you asked me to share, so I'm sharing with the devotees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Abhaycharan Prabhu wants to ask the question, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna by Charan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. The feet of the spiritual master. What's the significance of the feet of the spiritual master more than the hands of the spiritual master, the head of the spiritual master? Is there something intrinsically more in the feet of the spiritual master? Well, is it just that we approaching the spiritual master very humbly? So like we're like down at the feet, humility. Is it because of the humility aspect that it's the lowest part of the body? Or is there something more special about the feet? I've always wondered about that.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, his body is spiritualized. Every part of his body is spiritualized. And I think, as you say, in the mood of humility, the devotees approach the feet. But I had one amazing experience serving Srila Prabhupada in his last days. And that is that, for some reason, many of the personal servants left the room when Srila Prabhupada was lying on his bed. And the only two who were left were Upendra Prabhu and me. And Prabhupada motioned to his genitals like he had to pass water. And we had a container, a plastic container that we would fit on that area. And he would, he'd pass water into that container, and we would then we would remove it. So Upendra Prabhu motioned to me to do it, to put that plastic bottle, uh, where Prabhupada passed urine. And I found that act to be so purifying. I felt more purified by placing that paraphernalia in that part of Srila Prabhupada's body than if I had chanted 64 rounds or offered 100 artis. It was amazing. So, but yeah, that was just my own experience. But otherwise, yes, we approached the lotus feet.
Thank you very much, very much.
Krishna.
Is there any other questions? Maharaj, I've got one question then. As you said that Prabhupada said that if you love me, you go cooperate. And we often hear this statement as well. But Maharaj, what exactly the cooperation means? I mean, is it just the management part only or within the devotees? So can you elaborate more what cooperation exactly means?
Well, I would say first and foremost, it means we shouldn't fight. Again, in Srila Prabhupada's last days, Srila Narayan Maharaj said to Prabhupada that he should advise his disciples, his followers, not to work with personal interest, something like that. And in turn, Srila Prabhupada said to the devotees, don't fight. I've given direction in my will. So, yeah, we shouldn't fight. I mean, that of course, it depends, because having said that, I recalled something else, but it's not exactly fighting, but it's sort of like fighting. And that is the Hyderabad farm. There were 3 very strong-willed devotees who were in charge. And they had different opinions. And Srila Prabhupada instructed them that you meet together, you fight like cats and dogs, and then when you all agree, you go ahead. So that kind of fighting is sanctioned, meaning, discussing, threadbare. But then ultimately, there's a consensus should prevail. So, but yeah, that was a specific use of the word fight, but otherwise in general, we shouldn't fight. I mean, we can disagree. Of course, we can disagree. And there is an authority structure in ISKCON. So we may disagree, but then eventually we accept what the authority decides. We still can disagree, but we with the conclusion, but we still follow. Srila Prabhupada gave another nice example that that you're driving in a car and the driver has one idea of how to get to the destination and you have a different idea of how best to get to the destination. So you tell the driver, I think that we'll do better if we go this way. And the driver may not accept your advice. And because the driver is in the driver's seat, you just have to go along with what the driver decides. But still, Srila Prabhupada said, you can harbor within yourself the idea that your way would have been better. It's not wrong to think that your idea was better than what the authority finally decided on. But you have to go along with what the authority finally decided on, because he's the authority. He's in the driver's seat.
Thank you, Maharaj. But Maharaj, at times the disagreement leads to spoil the relationship amongst. So how to improve or overcome that?
Well, if we see that everyone, I'm assuming that everyone is working for, to serve the mission, for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure. And so we should see that and not get carried away by the differences, but we should see what is common, and that is our desire to serve Srila Prabhupada and please Srila Prabhupada. I think of one exchange I had with His Holiness Radhanath Swami. We were at the beach near my ashram in Carpinteria, California. And for some reason, my mind at that moment, my mind got preoccupied with something that a very esteemed god brother of ours had done to me, which hurt me. And I didn't want to have that thought or that feeling, but I couldn't help it. And it became very prominent at that moment. Maybe it was Krishna's arrangement to get me to bring it up to His Holiness Radhanath Swami. And Radhanath Swami gave the example of the ocean, that the ocean has waves. And, when you're in the ocean, a wave can hit you. It can even knock you over. But underneath the waves, the ocean is still and deep. So he was saying about that god brother that, yes, because of the wind, the circumstances, there may be a wave, and I might get hit by that wave, and I might get temporarily knocked over by that wave. But under the wave is the ocean, and so underneath it all is that devotee's love for Srila Prabhupada, and that's what I should see as much more significant than the wave that might rise up at a certain point and hit me. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Is there any other questions or comments? If not, then we can conclude. Nanvashwar, do you want to say about the things?
Maharaj, on behalf of the devotees in Oakland, all this participating in this forum, I'd like to thank you very much for giving your valuable time this late hour in your time. to give your association and wonderful class on Srila Prabhupada's final pastime. Your description was like a very graphic journey of Srila Prabhupada's pastime. We were like I felt it was like better than watching a video, the way you described. And I really thank you from the bottom of my heart to give us this association and taking us very close to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you, Maharaj, once again. And we hope to have your association in future. Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Well, if we're going to end now, I suggest we conclude with Vaishnava pranams. I'll say the English first, and then we can say the Sanskrit. Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees, who can fulfill the desire of everyone, and full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls.
Giriraj Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jai.